In his book Émergence et immersion du souffle du désir, that is, Emergence and Immersion of Breath and Desire, Jean-Marc Salette includes a chapter titled Breath is indissociable from water movements and their transformations. To begin, he reminds us that the diaphragmatic movement during exhalation relaxes and opens the diaphragm, allowing it to be available for external exchanges. Conversely, inhalation corresponds to the closure of this umbrella, as he describes the diaphragm. However, this inhalation is not possible without the intervention of Zhong Qi energy, which activates the respiratory pathways, initiating the inspiration of cosmic breath through the nostrils towards the sea of Qi, the sea of breath, at the center of the chest, corresponding to Renmai 17, Shanzhong. Salette then discusses Suen 25, which presents the reciprocal movement between breathing and Jinye. Suen 21 mentions how beverages enter the stomach. The life-sustaining breath travels and gathers there, ascends and is directed toward the spleen. The spleen's breath spreads its vital essence, ascends further and meets the lungs, thereby communicating and regulating the pathway of liquids. Salette likens the absorption of liquids by the spleen and stomach to an inhalation, quite literally an integration. Such integration, occurring in the center of the body, in the middle jiao, ascends towards the lungs and the skin, and entirely causes an ascent of liquid essence to the upper jiao. However, Suen 21 continues. A descent and transportation occur via the bladder. In inhalation, there is a filling of the bladder and expulsion of urine, benefiting the downward movement from the upper jiao to the middle jiao. Salette explains how these movements of water and qi, breath, generate a dynamic of opposition and complementarity in the more refined productions that will later converge in the 4 Cs. Lingshu 33 underscores that man possesses 4 Cs and 12 pathways of water, Jingshui. The water pathways flow into the Cs, and this looks promising because 4 Cs are often mentioned but rather never explained about. Salette then refers to his previous work from the book In the Ocean of Tastes, the Body's Intention, where he deduces from a Lingshu 12 text a series of body locations based on certain water pathways, which he interprets as cryptic allusions to the 4 Cs, following the ancient Chinese text tradition of obscurity. Thus, there is a location he labels Yang of Yang, situated above the Sanjiao meridian, corresponding to Zhutaiyang, the bladder meridian, and Thuxiaoyang, gallbladder meridian, whose cephalic pathways correspond to the skull and brain, the sea of marrow, also counterintuitively termed the Southern Sea. Points related to the Sea of Marrow include Dumai 1, Dumai 15, Dumai 16, Dumai 17, and Dumai 20. Another location, Yin of Yang now, related to the lungs, and Xinbaoluo, Master Heart, correlates with the Sea of Qi, as you know, located in the center of the chest. But the Sea of Qi is also known as the Northern Sea, and it resonates with the point Shanzhong, Renmai 17, as you know. There's a third location Salette detects termed Yang of Yin, below the Master of Heart, Xinbaoluo, which is known as the sea of food and corresponds to the spleen stomach. The acupoints corresponding to the sea of food is stomach 30. And lastly, yin of yin, below the stomach, corresponds to the sea of meridians and is associated with Chong Mai. Such sea of meridians includes points related to Chong Mai as bladder 11, stomach 37, and stomach 39. Well, where does all this lead? Because to me it would be less interesting if it didn't lead to practical learning, specifically in clinical practice. Let's delve into what is known about the 4 Cs, mainly developed by this author, Isalet. However, he doesn't explain things as structured as I've just presented. That's one of the challenges with this author. He guides you but requires constant reordering and organization. In fact, I believe my basic study work is mainly organizing. I had deduced some things previously, and this morning, while editing the video, I realized something else. Hence, to me, acupuncture is also this questioning, an exercise of interaction with knowledge to deduce concrete applications. And for those interested, I'll discuss the Chinese legend of Yu the Great, as explained by Jean-Marc Isalet in one of his books. The Chinese legend recounts the canalization works ordered by Emperor Yu the Great, aiming to consolidate the 9 provinces of the empire to make his country habitable. Yu the Great commanded the draining of water falling from the sky and streaming across the land toward the 4 seas, which represent the limit of emerged and cultivated land. In the 4 seas lies the unfathomable. It's inhabited by very threatening beings. The text described them as half human, half beast. Here's a side note to mention a text from Huinanzi. Turbid breath forms animals. Rare and subtle breath forms man. According to the fable, these dangerous creatures living in the 4 seas are necessary to achieve a change of dynasty, meaning a new area, which requires an approach to chaos, the source of renewal, here, the sea water. To try avoiding the danger resulting from the necessary opening of borders, guardians were placed to prevent a massive influx of these sea creatures, of which the emperor, and when they refer to the emperor, I believe we should symbolically think the heart center, had to know the name. The name means identity. Let me recap. To renew the lands, one has to come into contact with the chaos and peril of the 4 seas and selectively incorporate some of their contexts by identifying them. On a human level, Jean-Marc Isalet sees each of the 4 seas as the architect of a specific dialogue with the external world, periodically opening and closing it to ensure the fertilization and evolution, both biological and affective, of the subject. This external torrent, according to Isalet, not only sustains life but also connects the individual with the profound desires, weaving their development. We know that the ability to open consciousness to the terrifying context of the unconscious is an essential condition for evolving, changing dynasties, as the text says. For Isalet, the monsters inhabiting the seas are analogous to those frequenting our dreams. Let's clarify some aspects, see what we can extract specifically. Firstly, the four Cs aren't conceived as places of exchange within the body, but as a relationship with an external element. Similarly, we could say the same about consciousness, the subject's relationship with something outside their conscious psychic sphere. Secondly, in Aeschyle's words, these four Cs represent the fundamental orientations of the body's needs and the subject's desires. Each of them thus addresses a specific aspect of this psycho-psychical structure we are. I'll organize them and provide Aeschyle's interpretation, and then my own reflection on the matter. And I'll order them, as I've organized Aeschyle's text, into Yang of Yang, Yin of Yang, Yang of Yin, and Yin of Yin. So let's start with the Sea of Marrow. It's called Sui. Aeschyle relates it to thought and movement. It makes sense psychologically. What aspect could drag us down? Because, of course, the four Cs are what we can't control. My study on the resonances of the psyche on the Meridian Network, which is in my webpage, is based on the works of Jung, who was a disciple of Freud, and many contemporaries consider him to have surpassed the master in many aspects. Jung conceived the unconscious not only as a dark and deep place where our most earthly needs lie, but expanded its scope to encompass the most spiritual aspects of man, that is, the desire for transcendence and spirituality. This sphere also, for him, reside in our unconscious psyche, which, in fact, govern our impulses. And for him, that's why we like to grow, why we desire to grow deep down. Well, we're in Yang of Yang, the Sea of Marrow, and Aeschyle relates it to thought and movement. And I wonder if it also relates to the desire for transcendence. But this would be physiology. What would be the pathology of the desire for transcendence? I don't know, fanaticism. I say this because later we encounter a patient with problems, with conflicts, and I'd like to find acupuncture points to help these people. And we've already seen that there's a series of points related to the Sea of Marrow. Next, we have Yin of Yang, the Sea of Qi, Qihai, at Renmai 17, and some of the associated points, which I've marked with a question mark because they were added by some author in the French Acupuncture Journal, I think in number 184. Aeschyle, as far as I know, doesn't comment on the Sea of Qi, but I haven't read everything from him. But I think the chest is the area of exchange, when one takes in and releases air, right? To take and release, what we can think of? Smoking, physically? Psychological attachments, as pathology. We move on to Yang of Yin, the Sea of Nourishment, which Aeschyle relates to nutrition. Of course, it's the center, the spleen, it's giving and receiving, right? The stomach spleen is giving and receiving, and the pathology of bulimia might be related to points of the Sea of Nourishment, I think. And finally, we have the Sea of Blood, Shui, which, to further complicate matters, is also called the Sea of Meridians. And Aeschyle relates the Sea of Blood to sexuality. And, well, when losing control, I wonder about promiscuity. And that reminds me of a patient I had, a slender and somewhat rough woman, who had had a tumultuous gynecological clinic with periods of amenorrhea, huge menstrual clots. And this woman had become pregnant with fertility treatments, but then had another pregnancy, a spontaneous one, 3 months afterwards, following which he had an abortion. This abortion was complicated by sepsis and she was close to dying. And this woman with such a blood past, pathological past, told me that she loved sex and literally said that she could have been a fantastic prostitute. And also she had had an extramarital affair where sex was powerful. As she put it, I interpreted it as a sadomasochistic relationship. She said, "He mistreated me, but I took him to the limit of madness." And she added, "I think that was true love." And I thought, of course, love is the loss of self-limits. It's the loss of control through fusion. And sexuality is also a form of fusion. But as it's lived, it seems like a loss. In this case, an excessive invasion from the seas. There's no control, no name over the monsters invading. How difficult, right? To dare to enter some environments and not get completely lost in them. To conclude this kind of madness, I think that's the right term. The thought that came to me this morning is that, as we had discussed, the Sea of North, counterintuitively, is at Renmai 17. And when we consider man as Su and 6 does, facing south, Renmai 17 falls in the southern area. And on the other hand, the Dumai points of the Sea of Marrow are called by them the Southern Sea, acupoints. Now, trying to answer my morning thoughts, if you go to video number 1 of the glimpses, where I talk about numbers 1 and 2, when speaking about the 2, the yin-yang, there's a moment where I speak about the inversion of terms of the anterior heaven, the situation prior to manifestation and consecutive to manifestation, and the posterior heaven, which is where we are now. And it is precisely this inversion of terms of the 4 seas, where the northern sea is located on our southern zone and the southern sea is located in our northern zone, that has made me think that the 4 seas necessarily have to be related, at the very least, to our potential for transcendence, because in the anterior heaven, as several examples I mentioned in the glimpses video, there's an inversion of all terms, in this case, north-south.